I didn't set a trap. I built a memory. My name's Adrian Mercer. I'm 39, systems architect by title, but I've never cared much for what it says on the card. Titles are for people who want to look important in meetings. I care about what actually works when no one's watching. I've spent nearly 2 decades building systems designed not to fail, even if the people around them do. That's not paranoia. That's experience. I worked at a SaaS startup in Chicago. Back then, 20 engineers crammed into an old warehouse with cheap desks and better ideas. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. We didn't have budget for screw-ups. Stability wasn't just a feature, was survival. I was good at it, not flashy, just consistent. I wrote the infrastructure from scratch, documented every variable, every dependency, created a deployment flow that didn't need me holding its hand, because I knew someday I wouldn't be there. That was the point. It's funny how the things that make you valuable at the start become liabilities once the company wants to look shinier. We were small. Then the money came. Then Tyler came. Tyler was the new CEO. Mid-30s. Black t-shirts that cost too much. Always talking about velocity and market disruption. He could sell an investor on any except the idea that building things well takes time. He liked to nod while I explained things. He liked to smile like we were friends. He didn't like my answers. Not really. He didn't want to hear why encryption keys shouldn't be stored in the cloud vault. Why deployments needed approvals. Why logs needed to show everything, even the embarrassing errors. He wanted streamlined. He wanted fast. He wanted anything but the truth. I noticed it early. The invitations to meetings stopped showing up in my calendar. Slack channels I'd created went private without a word. It wasn't personal. It was policy. They don't fire you. They erase you. I didn't fight. Fighting would have given them something to push against. I just watched. I watched the patterns like I always did. Watching is underrated. People think you're passive. They forget it means you see everything. Meanwhile, the code base got shinier. They hired consultants to modernize it. Pipelines rewritten. Naming conventions updated to match the latest Medium post. My name stripped from commit history, one merge at a time. I kept doing my job. Or rather, the part they still let me do. I got a new title. Strategic Advisor. No team, no deploy access, no responsibility that mattered. Tyler handed me the promotion with that practiced grin, saying it freed me up for big picture thinking. Big picture, right. I didn't argue. I didn't explain why I'd built it the way I had. Why approvals weren't about slowing things down but about stopping things from burning down. Why encryption layers were designed to be stubborn. Because security isn't trust, it's design. Instead, I let them move me to the corner desk. I let them remove me from every decision. I let them forget. Because the thing about building systems is, if you build them honestly, they remember for you. That was my rule. No shortcuts. No shared secrets in Slack. No vault without an air gap. The most sensitive keys? Offline. On purpose. I called it my SafeBox protocol. Not because I was hiding anything. Because I wasn't willing to pretend security was optional. They never asked about that. Never cared to know where the real controls were. They wanted easy. They wanted fast. They wanted to believe the system was theirs, simply because they renamed it. I didn't correct them. People like Tyler don't want truth. They want applause. And they want someone else to clean up the mess when the applause dies down. So I watched them. I watched as the new CTO bragged in all hands about lean deployments and cutting legacy overhead. Watched the consultant smirk at the word legacy while reading documentation I wrote line by line at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, years before they were even hired. I wasn't angry. I was certain. I knew exactly how this story would go. I'd seen it before. And last time, I'd been caught off guard. Not this time, because I wasn't setting a trap. I was making sure the system would speak for itself when they stopped listening to me. That's the thing about design. It remembers. Long after the people in the boardroom forget why it was built that way. Long after they forget you were even there. If you've ever seen someone treated like they didn't matter, or been sidelined for telling the truth, hit that subscribe button. This one's for you. They didn't call it a firing. They didn't even call it a reorganization at first. They called it alignment. It started with calendar invites. Meetings I'd always attended simply stopped appearing. The daily stand-ups turned into lead stand-ups. The Slack channels for deployment approvals went private. No one told me I was out. They just stopped letting me in. That's the thing about corporate erasure, it's polite. It's so quiet you can almost convince yourself nothing's wrong. But I'm not stupid. I've seen this pattern before. The first time it happened, I was 28. Freshly hired by a healthcare startup desperate for someone who knew how to keep PHI from leaking into S3 buckets. I worked myself raw, making sure they didn't accidentally violate every law on the books. The thanks I got? They brought in a new CTO to scale and told me I'd be moved into an advisory role. Sounded important. Didn't mean anything. 3 weeks later, I was gone. Back then I was angry, blindsided. Thought working hard meant something. 10 years later, I don't get angry. I pay attention. At the Chicago startup, the signs weren't subtle if you bothered to read them. I saw the new DevOps director's name pop up on pull requests I hadn't reviewed. The pipeline logs showed changes with no approval gates. Variable names changing just to make them look new. Branding over substance. I watched Tyler host a town hall where he beamed about unlocking velocity and reducing deployment friction. He nodded at the CTO like they were sharing an inside joke about old-school guys who slowed things down. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. I knew I was the friction. I stopped talking in meetings. Or rather, I stopped being invited to talk. When I spoke up in Slack, the thread would go quiet. Then pick up again 5 messages down, pretending I hadn't spoken. It wasn't confrontation. It was omission. It was a plan. They didn't want to fight me. They wanted to make me irrelevant. That's how you replace someone without firing them. You make them so redundant they can't even object. I understood the game, so I stopped trying to prove my worth. People like Tyler don't change their minds because of logic. They change their minds when things break. I didn't want them to fail. That's the important part most people miss. I didn't want the system to collapse. I wanted it to last, even without me. That's why I'd built it the way I did in the first place. Because I knew this day would come. They thought stability was something you could buy with consultants and buzzwords. They never understood it was something you earned with consistency and caution. And I knew exactly when the countdown really started. It was the day Tyler smiled across the table and said, "We just need to align our resources better. Code 4, you're done." He didn't fire me that day. He just started writing me out. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I nodded. And I watched. Because erasure isn't an event. It's a process. One removed permission at a time. One Slack channel at a time. One skipped invite at a time. I watched them remove my name from the deploy rotation. I watched them spin up their own channels. I watched them joke with the consultants about untangling legacy. And all the while I kept showing up at 9, leaving at 5. No one could say I quit. They just hoped I'd get the message and go quietly. But I don't leave quietly. Not anymore. Not when I know exactly what they're breaking. Because while they were cutting me out of meetings, they weren't cutting me out of my own head. I was still thinking, still planning, still remembering exactly how the system was built. The parts that needed careful handling. The parts that wouldn't cooperate without the right key. The parts they never even thought to ask about. They didn't want me there, but they wanted what I built. They wanted it fast, modern, simplified. But the funny thing about simplification, if you don't know what you're removing, you're not streamlining. You're disabling. So I let them call me legacy. I let them move my desk to the corner. I let them erase my name from the repo. Because I knew the truth. You can rename a system all you want. But if you don't understand it, you don't own it. They called it legacy. Funny word for something that worked. When I first joined, there was nothing. No repo structure. No CI pipeline. No standard for naming variables. It was chaos disguised as hustle. They didn't want discipline. They wanted miracles on a deadline, but miracles fail under load. So I built something better. I didn't ask permission. I didn't wait for a directive. I just stayed late, night after night, writing documentation no one asked for but everyone would need. I designed the environment to be predictable, the pipeline to be consistent, the deploys to be safe. Safe didn't mean fast, but it meant it wouldn't wake us up at 2 a.m. with an outage. It meant when we shipped something new, it wouldn't blow up prod. I remember the first time we had a 0 downtime deployment. Half the team cheered. The other half didn't even notice. That's how I knew I did it right. Because if you do the job right, Most people won't even know you did anything at all. That was fine with me. I didn't care about credit. I cared about the logs being clean. I cared about the system doing exactly what it said on the tin. Most engineers don't think about security until it's too late. They think sharing credentials over Slack is fine if it's urgent. They think audit logs are optional. I don't. I built an encryption layer with rotating keys, manual rotation, offline storage. Not because I didn't trust the team, but because I don't trust people to stay careful when they're under pressure. That's the thing. You don't build for best case. You build for the day someone forgets. They used to call me paranoid. I called it design. That's why I kept the root token in what I called the SafeBox protocol. It wasn't in any cloud vault. It wasn't in any shared drive. It was on a hardware token, air-gapped, encrypted with a passphrase only I knew, offline, untouched, on purpose, because I wasn't building something for me. I was building something that would keep them safe long after I was gone, not out of loyalty, out of responsibility, because someone had to. When the consultants showed up, they didn't see any of that. They saw old, slow, inflexible. They saw an opportunity to impress Tyler by promising faster deploys, cleaner code, simpler workflows. They didn't ask why I'd built it with friction. They didn't ask what the friction was protecting. That's the thing about security. If you do it right, it's invisible, until you remove it. And by then it's too late. I watched them talk about refactoring, about modernizing. They wrote proposals full of buzzwords like containerization and cloud native, without understanding what they meant in context. They told Tyler they could reduce our deploy time by 40%. They didn't mention the risk. Or maybe they didn't know, because they didn't read the documentation, didn't ask the questions, didn't want the answers. Meanwhile, I sat at my desk, watching the merge logs stack up. I watched them rename variables like that was architecture. I watched them delete the audit hooks. They thought I was being quiet because I was defeated. I wasn't. I was taking notes, because the system didn't care who had the title. It only cared about the truth. It only did what it was designed to do, and I had designed it to say no to anything that didn't have the right key. Because that key wasn't just a password. It was trust, and you can't copy trust. You can only earn it. They never asked. They never earned it. They just assumed it was theirs. So I let them assume. They didn't remove me overnight. They did it carefully, like they were embarrassed to be seen doing it too quickly. First, the alignment chats. Tyler loved that phrase. He'd call you in, sit with his $80 t-shirt stretched tight over gym-earned shoulders, and explain how they were realigning resources to optimize outcomes. Translation: we don't want you in the way. My title changed. Senior Infrastructure Architect became Strategic Advisor. Sounds fancy. It wasn't. No direct reports. No deploy rights. No production access. No approvals. Just a window desk. A courtesy. I sat there every day, badge still active, logging into the dashboards I'd built. But no one asked me to check them. No one wanted me at the stand-up. I wasn't invited to retros. My name disappeared from the sprint planning board. I watched them work around me like I was a column in the middle of the office. Too expensive to remove, so they built their new architecture around it. I used to review every deployment script. Now I just watch the logs update themselves. New variables. No gating. No rollback hooks. They called it progress. The consultants cheered it on. They had senior in their titles, but they were kids. Confident. Quick with jokes in Slack. I remember one of them asked if we could ditch the legacy encryption layer because it slowed their CI/CD pipeline. Legacy. He said it like it was a bug. I didn't argue. No one wanted the reason. They wanted permission to ignore it. So I gave them what they wanted. Silence. I sat at my corner desk and kept logging in. Not to interfere. To observe. Because systems tell you when they're dying. Not loudly. In tiny, ugly errors that get filed under known issues until they explode. I watched their deploy logs start to get longer. Warnings flagged but unacknowledged. I watched as they pulled audit logs for cleanup and removed the last traces of my old approval flow. They didn't even know what they were deleting. They thought I was beaten. That I was too old to keep up. That my best days were behind me. I didn't argue. I let them say it. Because arguing is for people who want to be heard. I wasn't interested in being heard anymore. I was interested in being right. And there's a difference. Because systems don't listen. They remember. They do exactly what you told them to do. including refusing to authenticate anything that didn't have the right key, including logging every single failed handshake, including rejecting deploys that didn't meet the standard. I'd built that in, not as a trap, as protection. Protection from people who didn't know what they didn't know. The SafeBox protocol wasn't for me. It was for them, because I'd seen what happened when companies moved too fast. Cut corners. Sacrificed security for velocity. That's how breaches happened. How data ended up on the dark web. How customers lost trust forever. I didn't want that for us, even if they didn't want me. So I kept coming in. Saturday at that window desk. Watched the city change color as the sun moved. Watched them erase me line by line. And waited. Because erasure isn't personal. It's policy. It's process. It's their way of saying, we want what you built, but we don't want you. And I'd stopped taking it personally a long time ago. Because they didn't understand yet. But they would. I didn't interfere. That's important to understand. They always think you fight back by breaking things. By screaming. By making it obvious. But real damage doesn't need noise. So I stayed quiet. I watched. My terminal open every morning. Cursor blinking on logs they didn't even know existed. The mirror instance ran on a server they'd forgotten was provisioned years ago. A twin of production. Same code. Same environment. Except mine had the audit hooks. Mine kept everything. Every change. Every failed handshake. Every time they skipped a check to speed things up. I didn't stop them. I just watched the errors start to multiply. First it was staging. Warnings about unverified deploy artifacts. A failed encryption rotation. A mismatch in handshake protocols. The consultants called it a minor CI issue. They dropped the logs into a Jira ticket and forgot about it. I didn't. I watched the logs expand. I watched them remove approval gates from Jenkins. Delete the rollback plan. Because rollback plans are legacy, right? Who needs a plan to fail when you're planning to win? The new DevOps director was young. Loud. Confident. Wore hoodies with motivational slogans. Said move fast like it was a commandment. I saw his commits. Cleaning up what he called the spaghetti. He renamed variables. Flattened folder structures. Removed the error traps. He didn't ask why they were there. Didn't want to know. Didn't even read the documentation. Because documentation is for people who doubt themselves. I watched Tyler in meetings nod along to it all, smiling at slides that said, reduced deploy time 40%. He loved that number. Numbers are easy to sell to investors. They don't ask what's underneath. He never asked me why I built in friction. Never asked why certain steps required a human key. He didn't want to know. That's the thing about friction. It feels unnecessary until it's gone. Then you realize it was the only thing stopping you from running straight off a cliff. But they didn't see that. So I let them keep running. I remember the first email. Polite, casual. Hey Adrian, do you have the current encryption key for prod? We're getting some weird handshake errors in staging. Nathan, one of the contractors. He meant well. I didn't respond. Not to be difficult, but because the answer was in the documentation. Page 17, section 4.3. Key rotation is manually handled through the SafeBox protocol. Owner A. Mercer. They never read it. They never wanted to. They just wanted the shortcut. That's what they hired consultants for. They thought shortcuts were innovation. So I let them. I closed the email, opened my logs, watched another failed handshake come in. I didn't gloat, didn't smile. There's no satisfaction in watching something you built fail. Even when you warned them. Even when you were excluded for warning them. Especially then. Because I didn't build it to fail. I built it to make failure obvious. Unavoidable. Honest. A system can't lie to itself. It can only do what you tell it. So while they were rewriting scripts and presenting refactor decks to Tyler, I watched. I watched the error count tick up like a silent metronome. 1, 2, 4, 8. Multiplying in the background while they celebrated progress. And me? I sat at my window desk. I was the ghost in the building. Present. Ignored. But watching everything. Because I didn't need to sabotage anything. All I had to do was wait. Launch day was quiet. That's what people don't get about big failures. They expect alarms, smoke, sirens. But real collapse sounds like nothing at all. It was a Tuesday. Clouds over the Chicago skyline. Traffic moving slow enough that you could watch people check their phones and pretend not to be late. I got in at 8:45. Nobody said anything. Not even a polite nod. They were too busy. Slack was buzzing with excited messages. This is it. Big day. Let's make some noise. Tyler posted a fire emoji. Of course he did. I sat at my desk, logged into the mirror instance, and watched. They pushed at 9:01. For a few glorious minutes. It worked. Landing page loaded fast. API responses clean. Investors probably high-fiving each other over Zoom. I could imagine Tyler in front of his webcam, rehearsed grin, telling them, "See? Smooth. Told you we were ready." Then 9:10 hit. The first handshake error. Not a big one. Just enough to nudge a user back to the login screen. A 401 here. A 403 there. Nothing dramatic. But errors are like rot. You don't see them at first. But once you do, they're everywhere. I watch the queue start to build. API calls timing out. Load balancers failing over so many times they forgot what node they were talking to. Containers restarting in a frantic loop. Then the cascade. Auth layer rejecting every new session. Encrypted endpoint locked because it didn't have the key. The real key. The one in the Safebox protocol. Offline. Untouched. Because no one asked for it. They never thought they needed to. In Slack, messages turned from excited to tense. Anyone else getting auth errors? Roll it back. What's happening? Then silence. A pause before panic. It always happens like that. The moment when even the optimists realize they don't know how to fix it. I watched my mirror instance log every failed handshake. Error, error, error. A rhythm as precise as a heartbeat. I didn't touch anything. Didn't type a single command. Just watched. Because that's what it was designed to do. Refuse entry to anything that hadn't earned trust. They'd stripped out the human approvals. Thought they were making it clean. Fast. Easy. But easy breaks. And when it breaks everywhere. I remember leaning back in my chair, watching the logs scroll, feeling absolutely nothing. Not pride. Not vengeance. Just certainty. Because this wasn't a surprise. This was math. They thought they could replace me with hustle. With people who didn't ask questions. With consultants who promised speed. They thought you could ship trust like a feature. But trust isn't code. It's care. And you can't fake care. You either put in the work, or you pay for not doing it. At Neo, Tretio. Slack went full meltdown. Who last touched the rotation policy? Who has the key? Where is Adrian? Someone deleted my name from a thread. I smiled at that part, because it proved they still knew. Even after they erased me. Even after they sidelined me. They knew whose system it was. Not because I owned it, but because I understood it. Because I respected it. That was the cost of replacing people who gave a damn with people who gave a pitch. By 9:45, Tyler posted a company-wide update. We're experiencing some instability. Please stay focused. We'll resolve it. Instability. That was cute. They didn't want to say the truth. We forgot the key. Because admitting that meant admitting they forgot why I was there. I sipped my coffee. Watched the logs stack up. Didn't interfere. Didn't gloat. Didn't celebrate. Because this wasn't revenge. It was design. Exactly the way I'd built it. If you want stories about people quietly reclaiming what was taken from them, tap the subscribe button. You might need them more than you know. They called it a hiccup. Tyler's first all-hands message after the crash went out at 10:12 a.m. We're seeing minor instability. Stay focused. We're on it. Minor. That was generous. The app wasn't limping. It was dead. APIs timing out. Sessions. Failing authentication at every step. Retry storms choking the load balancers. They couldn't even roll back properly. They'd removed the rollback gates as part of their streamlining. Clean, they said. Lean. Like a car without seatbelts is lightweight. He sat at me disk. Badge is still active. Still technically on staff. But no one pinged me directly. Note at first. They didn't want the optics. Couldn't admit to the investors that they needed the old guy they'd quietly demoted to strategic advisor. Instead, they tried to fix it themselves. I watched it all. Mirror logs stacking up with handshake failures. Error after error. The same line repeated in quiet defiance. Access denied. Key not found. Not because I blocked them. Because they never had it. I never gave it. And they never asked. Not really. I remember the first email after launch went sideways. Polite. Hey Adrian, do you remember if the encryption handshake script was ever moved out of staging? Armin's getting cert failures. Armin, their new hotshot DevOps director, The one who called my work fragile legacy. I read it twice, closed it, didn't respond, because the answer was in the documentation. Still there. Page 17. Section 4.3. Safebox Protocol. Offline rotation. Owner, A. Mercer. They never read it, because they didn't want to know. They wanted to skip the friction, skip the conversation, skip the understanding. Second email came 2 hours later. More urgent. No greeting. Just, do you still have the token? We can't find it in Vault. From Tyler himself. I didn't open it, didn't mark it unread, didn't even pretend, because I wasn't going to save them from their own choices. That's the thing about being quiet. People mistake it for compliance. But silence has weight. It says, you made this. Sit with it. By noon, Slack channels were filled with half-panicked, half-blaming messages. Screenshots started circulating. Error pages. Wubailing R. Wubailing Sen. Loading spinners that never stopped. Investors started pinging Tyler directly. Meetings were rescheduled. Demo calls canceled. I could imagine the conference room atmosphere. Someone sweating. Someone pacing. Someone blaming legacy infrastructure without knowing what it even meant. They'd cut every safety measure I put in. Not maliciously. Casually. They deleted them like they were old comments in code. They wanted progress. But progress without understanding is just entropy. I didn't want this. I didn't want to watch them fail. I wanted them to listen. That's all I'd ever wanted. Just enough respect to ask why I built it that way. They never did. So now they had to listen to the system instead. Because the system wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was precise. It didn't punish. It enforced. It did exactly what I told it to do years ago. Don't open without the right key. That was the cost. Not of the code, but of not caring. And I was done teaching lessons for free. By late afternoon, the polite emails stopped. Silence is honest. It's what happens when people realize they have nothing left to offer except embarrassment. I watched Slack slow to a crawl. People had stopped arguing and started waiting. Waiting for leadership to fix it. Waiting for someone to have the answer. But the answer was gone. Offline. Sitting quietly in the safe box. Untouched. They hadn't asked for it when it mattered. Now they couldn't. Not without admitting why they needed me. It took until the next morning for Tyler to do it. A meeting request popped onto my calendar at 7:48 a.m. Subject line, quick alignment touchpoint. Location, Tyler's office. Attendees, Tyler, CTO, legal. No note, no context. Just there. It wasn't marked mandatory. Didn't need to be. That was the trick. Pretend it's a conversation. Make it look like an option. But everyone knows you show up. I remember standing at my apartment window that morning, coffee going cold in my hand. Sky gray. Fitting. I knew exactly how it would go. I didn't prep a presentation. Didn't bring a laptop. Didn't need to. Because I wasn't there to help them plan. I was there to listen, to see if they'd finally say it out loud. I arrived on time. The office was too quiet. No music on. No small talk at reception. Everyone knew, or at least they suspected. I walked the hallway to Tyler's office, watching the reflection of myself in the glass. Older, tired, but steady. I knocked once, opened the door. Tyler was standing behind his desk, arms crossed. The CTO sat at the table, tablet in front of him. Legal counsel had a folder open, pen in hand. No one smiled. For once, Tyler cleared his throat first. Adrian, thanks for coming in. I sat. Didn't say anything. He tried again. Look, we know launch didn't go as planned. I nodded once. We underestimated some things. Some things. Nice way of saying we cut you out and it broke. The CTO shifted uncomfortably. Legal kept her eyes on the contract. Tuller tried for sincerity. We'd like your help getting things back on track. He said it slow. Measured. He wanted it to sound respectful. Didn't want to spook the lawyer. I let the silence sit. People rush to fill silence. They panic. They confess. So he kept going. We know you're frustrated. But we need to move past that. Focus on solutions. Solutions. That's the word people use when they want you to forget how you got here. The CTO cleared his throat. We'd be happy to retain you as a consultant. Flexible hours. Generous rate. He looked proud of the offer. Like I'd leap at the chance to fix their mess on demand. I looked at the folder in front of legal. Standard consulting agreement. NDA. Hourly billing. A leash they could unclip when it was over. Number. That wasn't what this was going to be. Consulting is for problems you want to solve. This wasn't a problem. This was a consequence. So I shook my head. Slow, deliberate, and pulled out my own folder. Laid it on the table. Tula blinked. CTO leaned in, frowning. Legal lifted her pen, but didn't write anything. I didn't speak at first. Just let them look at it. Let them see the difference between help and terms. Because I wasn't selling my time. I was licensing the key. That's all. They didn't open the folder right away. No one wanted to be first. Tyler glanced at it like it might bite him. The CTO shifted in his seat. Legal finally cleared her throat. She pulled it closer, opened it, and read. Silence stretched. That's the sound of leverage. Not shouting, not threats. Just quiet. Because quiet means someone's realizing they have no good move left. I didn't rush them. Didn't explain. I'd already said everything I needed to say in the document. It wasn't an offer of help. It was a line in the sand. They wanted access. They'd license it. Not me. Not my time. Not my hours on call. Just the key. The system I designed. The one they chose to ignore until they couldn't. Tula tried first. Adrian, this is unusual. I didn't respond. Because it wasn't. Not really. Licensing IP isn't unusual. It's standard. They'd just never imagined I had any. Because they'd decided I was obsolete. Because they'd convinced themselves the system was theirs just because they paid my salary once. The CTO finally spoke. He was angry. Good. You built this while you were employed here. I nodded. Didn't deny it. So you don't own it. I let him finish. Then I spoke. Calm. Level. You fired me before asking for ownership. His mouth opened. Shut. I kept going. You cut me out of approvals. You removed my access. You deleted my name from the repo. You stopped paying me for anything except the title on a door. I gestured at the folder. What's in there is what you forgot to collect when you decided you didn't need me. Legal didn't say anything yet. She was reading carefully. Because she knew. She saw the dates in the appendix. The commit hashes. The audit logs. The documentation references. All meticulously recorded in my mirror instance. All showing exactly when I built the SafeBox protocol. When I documented it. When I flagged it in meetings they never invited me to again. Because it wasn't sabotage. It wasn't hidden. It was just ignored. Tyler tried again. Adrian, let's be reasonable. He tilted my head. This is reasonable. He didn't like that. Of course he didn't. Reasonable to him meant I'd give in because it was polite. Because it was expected. Because I was supposed to be grateful they were even talking to me. But I wasn't. I was done. Consulting is for problems you want to solve, I said. This isn't a problem. It's a consequence. They all went quiet again. Legal finally closed the folder. Set her pen down. Looked at Tyler. Didn't say a word. She didn't need to. He understood. Or he was starting to. Because this wasn't about friendship. Wasn't about loyalty. Wasn't even about fairness. It was about ownership. They wanted the system to work. They needed what I built. And what I built wasn't theirs just because they renamed it. Because ownership isn't about who yells the loudest. Or who has the title. It's about who understands it enough to make it work. And they didn't. They never did. That was their mistake. Not mine. The room went quiet after that. No one wanted to say the next thing first. Silence is a strategy. I knew that better than anyone. I let it sit. Let them feel the shape of it. Because that's when people admit things they don't want to say. Tyler broke first. He drummed his fingers on the table. Didn't look at me. So, what are you asking for? I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to have to ask twice. It matters. Being the one who says it. He tried again. Adrian, be reasonable. We want this to be fair. Fair. I almost laughed. But I didn't. Because laughter would have let them think I was emotional. Instead, I kept my voice even. It's in the contract. I gestured at the folder on the table. Page 2. Legal flipped it open. Read. Hairpin Hovert. CTO leaned in to see over her shoulder. His face twisted. That number's insane. I didn't look at him. It's exact. He scoffed. We can hire 10 people for that. I nodded. You should. I meant it. He didn't. Because they didn't have time. Not anymore. That's the cost of forgetting how things work. You think you have options. Then you realize you don't. Legal didn't say anything. She just kept reading. Because she was the only one in the room who really understood leverage. She saw the dates, the commits, the logs. She knew if they went to court it would look exactly like what it was. They'd fired the architect before securing the blueprints. Tyler exhaled, a long, tired sound. Adrian, this is going to hurt us. He tilted me head. Number it's going to cost you. There's a difference. Hurt is emotional. Cost is math. He didn't like that answer. He looked at legal for backup. She didn't give it. She was reading the indemnity clause. She cleared her throat. It's clean. Tuiler looked back at me. Eyes narrowed. You built this while on our payroll. I nodded. And you stopped paying me to build it. You gave me an advisory title with no scope, no deliverables, no access. You made sure of that. But I didn't delete what I'd already built. I documented it. I kept it updated. You chose not to collect it. He shook his head. This is blackmail. I didn't react. Because that's what people say when they don't want to admit they're paying for their own neglect. Number, it's licensing. He sneered. You think you're irreplaceable? I met his gaze. Steady. No one's irreplaceable. But starting over costs time you don't have. I'm not selling me. I'm selling access. That's all. Legal tapped her pen once. Deliberate? It's cheaper than a rebuild. Tyler glared at her. She didn't flinch. Because she was right. This wasn't about me winning. It was about them running out of options. He exhaled again, sank back in his chair. You really don't want to help us, do you? I considered that. I did. Once. Let that hang. Because that was the truth they never wanted to say. They could have kept me. They could have asked. Listened. Understood. But they didn't. Now it wasn't about helping. It was about terms. He finally looked at legal. She nodded. Slow. Careful. We sign it? We get the key today? I nodded once. You get the key. The logs. The full process. He sighed. Closed his eyes. Fine. He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't want to see me. Because in that moment he saw himself. The guy who wanted shortcuts so badly he forgot to check the cost. They didn't shake my hand. That's not how these things end. Tyler just signed. Legal countersigned. The CTO didn't even look at me. He was too busy staring at the table. Like if he glared hard enough it might swallow him. The folder sat between us for a moment. Final. Unavoidable. Tyler pushed it across. We'll wire it today. I didn't nod. Didn't thank him. Just closed the folder. Slipped it into my bag. And stood. You'll have what you paid for. No one said goodbye. I didn't expect them to. I walked out of the glass office, feeling their eyes on my back. I didn't turn around. Because you only turn around when you want them to see your face. I didn't need them to see anything. Outside, the office felt smaller than it ever had. Hallways that used to buzz were silent. No one met my eyes. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they did and didn't want to be part of it. It didn't matter. I left my badge at reception, felt the weight of it in my hand for a second before I set it down. That was the last thing tying me there. The last thing they could revoke, because access was no longer theirs to control. That afternoon the wire cleared. No note. No subject line beyond the transaction reference. Just numbers. Clean. Clinical. It was more than they'd ever paid me while I was on payroll. 10 times over. The cost not of my time, but of forgetting whose system it was. I didn't spend it. Didn't even check the balance after it hit. Because it wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about watching them write down in the ledger, once and for all, that they didn't own me. That they never did. I went home. Saturday in my apartment. Laptop closed. Safe box on the table. Offline. Still, I held it in my hand. The physical token. Small. Unassuming. They'd never understood that this was the system. That it wasn't lines of code. Or container orchestration. Or CI pipelines. It was trust. Written in logic. Rules enforced even when people forgot why. I plugged it in. Not for them. For me. Just to check. Mirror instance lit up. Log screen. No errors. Handshake complete. As smooth as the day I wrote it. I watched it run for a while. The old environment. My environment. Quiet. Predictable. Honest. It didn't know what had happened. Didn't care about meetings or politics or cost centers. It just worked. Because I told it how. Because I refused to compromise even when they begged me to go faster. And now they'd paid for that refusal. They paid for my stubbornness. My caution. My lack of ambition. Funny how that's what they called it when they wanted me gone. Too slow. Too careful. Legacy. And then, it was the only thing they wanted. I sat back in my chair. closed the terminal, unplugged the token, locked it back in the safe box, pushed it to the back of the drawer, because they didn't need me anymore. Not directly. They had what they paid for, what they begged for: access, stability, but not understanding. Never understanding. Because you can buy a key, but you can't buy knowing why it was made that way in the first place. And that was fine. That was enough. I didn't go back to the office after that. No final round of goodbyes. No drinks at the local bar to stay in touch. I didn't want it. They didn't either. We all understood it was done. That week, I packed up my apartment. Not in a rush. Careful. Methodical. The way I'd done everything else. Books I actually liked. Clothes I'd kept too long because they fit just right. Notes in old journals no one would ever read. I didn't bring the server token with me. I left it in the drawer. Powered off. Still sealed in the safe box. Offline. Because it wasn't mine anymore. Not really. They had paid for access. Not ownership. And that was the difference. They could use the key, but they'd never know why it was built that way. Never feel the weight of every choice baked into it. Every approval gate. Every logging hook. Every line written to keep them safe from themselves. They didn't want to know. And now they didn't have to. The system would work. Until it didn't. And someone else would be blamed when it failed again. Because that's how it goes. I didn't leave bitter. Not exactly. I left clear. That matters more. Because there's a difference between revenge and resolution. Revenge burns the bridge for show. Resolution just stops pretending there was ever a bridge at all. On my last day in Chicago, I locked the apartment door behind me. Listened to the latch click home. Felt the quiet settle in the hallway. It was a good quiet. The kind that says you've finished something. Even if no one claps. Even if no one notices. I didn't post about it. Didn't update LinkedIn with some sanitized farewell. Didn't thank them for the opportunity. Because there was nothing to thank them for. Except, maybe the lesson. That sometimes the most important thing you can do is walk away. Clean. No apologies. No leftover promises. Just your own 2 feet taking you somewhere else. I left Chicago on a Sunday. Watched the skyline fall away behind the train window. Sunrise caught the glass towers. Lit them up in bands of gold like they were worth something. And I let them go. Didn't check Slack. Didn't look at old commit logs. Didn't refresh dashboards. Because it wasn't mine to fix anymore. And that was the point. Some exits don't need an audience. They don't need a speech. They just need to be final. That's what this was. A clean exit. No trace. No regrets. Just silence. The kind that works best when you choose it. A week later, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a card. 1 line, handwritten. We should have asked. No signature. Didn't need one. I folded it once. Slid it into my notebook. Didn't respond. Because some acknowledgements don't need an answer. They're enough by themselves. These days, I work quieter. Smaller teams. Founders who ask hard questions. Clients who don't want shortcuts. Just the truth. I don't stay long. Don't make myself too necessary. Because being necessary isn't the same as being valued. It's just another trap. And I don't do traps anymore. I do systems. Ones that speak for themselves. And when they're done, I walk away. Because that's the thing about being the architect. You know exactly how much you can give. And when to stop. If you've ever had to leave in silence so they'd finally hear you, hit subscribe. You're not alone here.